Who do you trust when the world turns its back on your truth? Marlene Davis typed every word in Pinewood's courthouse, her fingers dancing across the stenograph, capturing justice, or so she thought. At 58, she was a fixture, yet Judge Warren Caldwell, with his icy blue eyes, called her girl and sneered her name like a curse. He wanted her gone, her presence a thorn in his side. Marlene felt the weight of being unseen. Her years of service dismissed her dignity, chipped away in whispers. Then one evening, in a dim hallway, a shadowed figure struck her down. Only Rusty, her old hound, saw it all, his growls echoing in the silence. Was she fighting for her job or for the right to exist in a town that erased her? A fire stirred in her soul, a reckoning was coming. Folks, how's your spirit holding up? Ever felt like you're shouting into the wind? Walk. With Marlene, whose truth and Rusty's loyalty will roar louder than Pinewood's lies. Pinewood, Georgia, nestled in the folds of red clay hills, was a town that wore its history like a Sunday suit polished on the surface, frayed at the seams. The courthouse, a squat brick building with white columns, stood at the heart of Main Street, its clock tower ticking like a judge's gavel. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and old paper, a mix of solemnity and secrets. Marlene Davis had spent 22 years in that building, her stenograph a quiet sentinel in courtroom B. At 58, her cocoa-brown skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, her hair pulled into a neat bun, her glasses perched low on her nose. She was a woman who carried herself with grace even when the world didn't notice. Marlene's days began at dawn in her modest clapboard house on Sycamore Lane, a street lined with pecan trees and memories. Her home painted a soft yellow as a sanctuary of framed family photos, quilted throws, and the scent of coffee brewing. Rusty, her 10-year-old hound, lay by the hearth, his brindle coat flecked with gray, his amber eyes tracking her every move. He'd been her shadow since her husband Clarence passed 5 years ago, leaving a void no courtroom could fill. Each morning, Marlene fed Rusty a scrap of bacon, whispering, "You're my hard old man," before heading to work, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The town of Pinewood was small, barely 5,000 souls split by an invisible line. The east side, where Marlene lived, was black pinewood churches with swaying choirs, barbershops humming with laughter, and porches where elders swapped stories. The west side, with its manicured lawns and gated homes, belonged to white Pinewood, where Judge Warren Caldwell held court. Not just in the courthouse, but in the country club and city hall. Warren 62 was a man of sharp suits and sharper words. His silver hair slicked back, his smile a blade. He'd been judged for 15 years, his rulings as predictable as the Georgia heat, lenient for some, merciless for others. To him, Marlene was a relic, a black woman who typed too fast, saw too much, and refused to bow. Marlene's role as court stenographer was her pride. She recorded every trial, her fingers a blur, capturing pleas testimonies and Warren's barbed asides. She'd seen young black men sentenced harshly for minor crimes while white defendants walked free. She'd heard Warren call her girl in front of lawyers, his tone dripping with condescension. Marlene don't dawdle, he'd snap, though she was always early. She swallowed the insults, her jaw tight, her heart whispering, "Keep going," her co-workers. Clara, the white receptionist with a kind smile, and Joe, the black janitor who shared her coffee breaks, knew the score. "He's got it out for you," Joe muttered one day, mopping the hallway. Clara nodded, adding, "He's been worse since you corrected his docket last month." The courthouse wasn't just a workplace, it was a stage for Pinewood's unspoken rules. Black employees entered through the side door while white staff used the front. Marlene, stubborn as her grandmother, who'd marched in Selma, used the front, her chin high, ignoring the stares. She'd earned her place graduating top of her stenography class in Atlanta, building a life in a town that didn't always want her. But Warren's campaign to oust her was relentless. He'd nitpick her transcripts, question her punctuality, and once misplaced her annual review, delaying her raise. "You're not a fit here," he'd said. Last spring, his voice low, his office door half closed. Marlene had stared back unblinking and replied, "I've been fitting just fine since '03. Outside work, Marlene found solace in her community. She sang alto in the choir at Mount Zion Baptist, her voice rich and steady. She mentored kids at the rec center, teaching them to read with the same patience she'd shown her own daughter, now a nurse in Charlotte. Her best friend Evelyn, a retired teacher with a laugh, like a church bell hosted card nights where they'd sip sweet tea and vent. "That judge thinks he's God," Evelyn said one evening, slapping down a spade. "He's just a man, Marlene, and men fall." Marlene smiled, but her heart was heavy. She felt the walls closing in her job, her legacy slipping away. Rusty was her constant. He'd wait by the courthouse steps each evening, tethered to a shady oak, his tail thumping when Marlene emerged. Townsfolk loved him, kids petted his ears, old men tossed him treats, but Warren despised him. "That mutt's a nuisance," he'd barked once, kicking at Rusty's water bowl. Marlene had knelt, stroking Rusty's head, her voice calm but steel-edged. "He's family judge." That moment, small as it was, marked her in Warren's eyes. A woman who wouldn't break. Pinewood's rhythm was slow, but tension simmered beneath. Whispers of Warren's bias had long circulated in Black Pinewood, but fear kept them quiet. He controlled jobs, permits, even scholarships. To challenge him was to risk everything. Marlene knew this, yet. She felt a stirring, a call to stand taller. The assault hadn't happened yet, but the air was thick with warning. She'd catch Warren watching her, his gaze cold, calculating. She'd notice shadows in the courthouse hall's doors left ajar. Rusty sensed it too, his hackles rising at odd hours. As summer faded, Pinewood prepared for its annual Founders' Day, a festival of fried chicken live music and speeches by men like Warren. Marlene, as always, would attend her stenographer's precision, noting every word, every slight. She didn't know that night would change everything, that Rusty's eyes would see what no one else could. For now, she walked through Pinewood, her town, her battleground, her name a quiet drumbeat in her chest. The air in Pinewood thickened as September rolled in the Georgia heat, clinging like a grudge. Marlene Davis felt it in her bones, a storm brewing not in the sky but in the courthouse. Judge Warren Caldwell's campaign to erase her had shifted from subtle to suffocating. His icy stares followed her through courtroom B, his voice sharper when he snapped, "Marlene, redo that transcript sloppy work." Her transcripts were flawless, always had been, but Warren's accusations piled up, each one a pebble in a growing landslide. She'd catch him whispering to the clerk, his eyes flicking her way, his smile thin as a razor. "He's building a case to fire you, Joe," the janitor warned over coffee, his voice low. "Watch your back." Marlene tried to focus, her fingers flying over the stenograph, but the weight of Warren's disdain was heavy. He'd started assigning her extra duties, filing old cases, fetching his coffee tasks beneath her role. "You don't mind, do you, girl?" He'd say the word girl a slap. She minded, but she complied, her jaw tight, her pride burning. Clara, the receptionist, noticed the change. "He's never this hard on anyone else," she whispered one afternoon, slipping Marlene a peppermint. "It's not right." Marlene nodded, but right and wrong didn't sway men like Warren. Outside the courthouse, Pinewood buzzed with Founders' Day preparations. Banners fluttered along Main Street and the scent of barbecue drifted from the park. Marlene usually loved the festival, singing with the choir, sharing laughs with Evelyn, but this year, Warren's presence loomed. He'd give the keynote speech, his voice booming over the crowd, his power on display. Marlene dreaded it, knowing he'd find a way to slight her, maybe in front of the whole town. She confided in Evelyn one evening over spades. "He's waiting for me to slip," she said, her cards trembling. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Then don't slip, sister. You're stronger than his hate." But Warren's tactics grew bolder. One morning, Marlene found her desk ransacked, files scattered, her stenograph unplugged. "Clumsy," Marlene, Warren remarked, passing by, his tone mocking. She spent hours fixing it, her heart pounding. Later, she overheard him on the phone in his chambers. "She's a problem. I'll handle it." The words chilled her, but she had no proof, no witness. Rusty sensed her unease. His growls low when she returned home, his body pressed close as she sat on the porch staring at the pecan trees. "What's he planning, Rusty?" she murmured, scratching his ears. The dog's amber eyes held hers, steady knowing. The tension spilled beyond the courthouse. At Mount Zion, Baptist whispers spread about Warren's latest rulings, harsher sentences for black defendants, lighter ones for white. Marlene typed every word, her stomach twisting, as a 19-year-old black boy got 5 years for a stolen car while a white man walked free after a DUI. She wanted to speak out, but fear stopped her. Warren controlled too much, jobs, reputations, futures. Still, she started keeping notes, jotting down his asides, his inconsistencies in a small notebook she hid in her purse. Just in case, she told herself, though, she wasn't sure what case meant yet. Then came the courthouse meeting. Warren called the staff together to discuss efficiency. Marlene sat in the back, her notebook tucked away, Rusty waiting outside. Warren stood at the front, his suit pristine, his voice smooth. "We need to streamline," he said, his eyes locking on Marlene. "Some roles are redundant." The room went quiet. Clara shifted uncomfortably. Joe's hands clenched. Marlene felt her pulse race. Was this it? Was he firing her in front of everyone? She raised her hand, voice steady. "My work's essential, Judge. The record's the backbone of this court." Warren's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see, Marlene. We'll see." That night, the assault happened. Marlene stayed late, finishing a transcript Warren had demanded by morning. The courthouse was empty, the halls dim, the clock tower chiming 9. Rusty was tethered outside his water bowl by the oak. She gathered her things, her heels echoing when a shadow moved in the hallway. Before she could turn, a force slammed into her, knocking her to the floor. Pain exploded in her shoulder, her glasses skittered away. A low voice hissed, "Stay down." Then footsteps fading. Rusty's barks erupted outside, frantic clawing at the door. Marlene lay there, gasping, her mind racing. Who? Why? But deep down she knew Warren's shadow stretched long. She crawled to the door, freeing Rusty, who licked her face, his growls softening. Blood trickled from a cut on her cheek. Her arm throbbed. No one else was there. No cameras in that old hallway. Just her and Rusty, the only witness to a crime no one would believe. She drove home shaking and cleaned her wounds, Rusty at her feet. Evelyn came over, her face grim. "You need to report this," she urged. Marlene shook her head. To who Warren's the law here? But the fire in her chest grew. She wouldn't stay down. The next day, Warren acted as if nothing had happened, his smile smug as he handed her another stack of files. "Rough night, Marlene," he asked, his tone laced with something dark. She met his gaze, her voice low. "I'm still here, Judge." He blinked just for a moment and she saw it fear. He hadn't broken her, not yet. But the town was watching now, whispers spreading. Founders' Day was 2 days away and Marlene knew she had to act. Rusty's eyes, her notes, her truth, they were all she had and they'd have to be enough. Marlene Davis woke the morning after the assault with a bruise blooming on her shoulder and a fire in her gut. The mirror showed a cut on her cheek, a thin red line, but her eyes burned with something new, defiance. She'd spent the night replaying the hallway attack, the hissed "stay," down the frantic barks of Rusty, her hound who'd seen it all. Pinewood's courthouse, once her pride, now felt like a trap, and Judge Warren Caldwell was the hunter. But Marlene wasn't prey. Not anymore. Today she'd start fighting back, and Rusty's loyalty her hidden notebook, and a spark of courage would light the way. She brewed coffee, the aroma filling her yellow clapboard house on Sycamore Lane. Rusty lay at her feet, his brindle coat warm against her shins, his amber eyes steady. "You know something, don't you, boy?" she whispered, scratching his ears. He'd barked like a banshee that night, clawing at the courthouse door. If only dogs could testify. She dressed carefully, navy skirt, crisp blouse, her grandmother's cross necklace for strength, and slipped her notebook into her purse. Those pages held Warren's slights, his biased rulings, his whispered threats. They were her ammunition, but she needed more. At Mount Zion Baptist, Marlene met Evelyn before choir practice. The church's stained glass windows cast rainbows on the pews and the organ hummed softly. Evelyn's face tightened at the sight of Marlene's bruise. "You're not going back to that courthouse," she said, her voice fierce. Marlene shook her head. "I have to. If I quit, he wins." Evelyn gripped her hand. "Then you need a plan. Folks are talking Joe, Clara, even some white folks at the market. They're tired of Warren's ways." Marlene's heart quickened. Was Pinewood waking up? She confided in Evelyn about her notebook, the assault Rusty's witness. Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "That dog's your guardian, and those notes, they're your sword." Marlene returned to the courthouse, her heels clicking on the front steps, ignoring the side door. Rusty waited by the oak, his water bowl refilled by Clara, who gave Marlene a worried nod. Inside, Warren was in courtroom B, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. He didn't look at her, but his voice cut when he said, "Marlene, I need yesterday's transcript by noon." She nodded, her face calm, but her mind raced. Noon was impossible, he knew it. This was another test, another excuse to call her incompetent. She sat at her stenograph typing, but her eyes scanned the room. Clara was at the front desk. Joe was mopping the hall in a new face. A young white lawyer, Daniel Hayes, sat in the gallery watching Warren closely. Daniel, 32, had moved to Pinewood from Atlanta, his briefcase stuffed with ideals. He'd heard rumors about Warren's bias and had started asking questions. Marlene had noticed him before jotting notes during trials, his brow furrowed at Warren's rulings. Today she caught his eye and he gave a small nod. Was he an ally? She couldn't trust yet, but hope flickered. At her lunch break, she approached Joe in the basement where he stored cleaning supplies. "Joe, you ever see anything strange after hours?" she asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "Saw Warren's car here late last week. No reason for it." Her pulse jumped. A clue, maybe. That afternoon, Marlene made a bold move. She visited the town library, a quiet brick building with creaky floors. Miss Lorraine, the black librarian who'd known Marlene since childhood, greeted her warmly. "Heard you're having trouble with that judge," she said, adjusting her glasses. Marlene trusted Lorraine's discretion and asked for old courthouse records, maintenance logs, employee schedules. "Looking for something specific?" Lorraine asked. Marlene leaned in. "Proof." Lorraine's smile was knowing. By evening, Marlene had a stack of papers showing Warren's late-night visits unexplained and a log of a broken hallway light the night of the assault. No cameras, but patterns. Back home, Marlene spread the papers on her kitchen table, Rusty snoring nearby. The logs weren't enough, but they were a start. She added them to her notebook, her handwriting steady. Then a knock. Clara nervous, holding a manila envelope. "Found this in the clerk's office," she whispered. "Warren's been shredding documents. I saved what I could." Inside were fragments of Warren's correspondence, one mentioning removing obstacles. Marlene's breath caught. Clara hugged her. "Be careful, Marlene. He's dangerous." Marlene nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't alone anymore. The turning point came the next day at a pretrial hearing. Warren was in rare form berating a black defendant for a minor charge. Marlene typed her fingers steady, but her eyes caught Daniel Hayes slipping a note to the defense attorney. The attorney, a grizzled black man named Mr. Thompson, challenged Warren's ruling citing precedent. Warren's face reddened, but he backed down, a rare crack in his armor. After Daniel approached Marlene in the hall, "I've been watching you," he said, voice low. "You see everything. If you've got evidence, I can help." Marlene studied him, then nodded. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring your courage." That night, Marlene sat on her porch, Rusty at her side, the pecan trees swaying. Founders' Day was tomorrow, and Warren's speech would draw the town. She'd be there, notebook in hand, Daniel by her side, and Rusty's truth in her heart. The assault had broken something open, not her spirit but her fear. She wasn't just fighting for her job now. She was fighting for Pinewood, for every soul Warren had crushed. The tide was turning, and Marlene Davis was ready to rise. Founders' Day dawned in Pinewood, Georgia, with a sky as blue as a gospel hymn and a breeze carrying the scent of fried chicken and magnolias. Main Street was alive with laughter, children chasing balloons, and the sizzle of grills in the park. But for Marlene Davis, the festival was a battlefield. At 58, her bruise faded, but her resolve burned bright. Tonight, Judge Warren Caldwell would take the stage, his keynote speech a crown on his reign over Pinewood. Marlene, armed with her notebook, courthouse logs, Clara's documents, and the truth only Rusty had seen, was ready to topple him. The courthouse assault had lit a fuse, and this was the explosion. Marlene, dressed with care, her best navy dress, her grandmother's cross necklace, her hair swept into a regal bun. Rusty, her brindle hound, sensed the charge in the air, his tail thumping as she fed him a biscuit. "You're with me, old man," she said, his amber eyes steady. She slipped her notebook and papers into a leather satchel, her hands steady despite the pulse in her throat. Evelyn arrived, her Sunday hat bold, her voice firm. "You're doing this for all of us, Marlene." They hugged, and Marlene felt the weight of Sycamore Lane of black pinewood on her shoulders. The park was packed by dusk string lights twinkling, a stage draped in red, white, and blue. Marlene stood near the front, Evelyn at her side. Rusty tethered to a nearby tree, his ears pricked. Clara and Joe were in the crowd, their nods a quiet strength. Daniel Hayes, the young lawyer, lingered by the stage steps, his briefcase ready. Mr. Thompson, the defense attorney, was there too, his eyes sharp. The town buzzed white pinewood in lawn chairs, black pinewood standing proud, a divide as old as the oaks. Warren stepped onto the stage, his silver hair gleaming, his suit crisp, his smile a practiced mask. The crowd clapped, some louder than others. Warren's speech began with charm, praising Pinewood's heritage and progress. His voice boomed, but Marlene heard the cracks, his glance at her, his grip on the podium. She clutched her satchel, her heart a drum. Halfway through, he veered, his tone sharp. "We must clear obstacles to our future," he said, eyes on Marlene. "Those who don't fit must step aside." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Marlene felt the sting, but her fire roared. This was her moment. She stepped forward, raising her hand, her voice clear as a church bell. "Judge Caldwell, I have something to say." The crowd hushed. Warren's smile froze. "This isn't the time, Marlene," he snapped, but she climbed the stage steps, satchel in hand. Rusty barked a low, fierce sound, drawing eyes. Daniel nodded from below, Mr. Thompson close behind. Marlene faced the crowd, her glasses glinting. "I've served this town 22 years, she began, but this man wants me gone. Not just me, justice itself." She opened her satchel, holding up her notebook. "These are his words, his rulings, his bias, harsh sentences for black folks, leniency for others." Gas rippled, white faces paled, black faces leaned in. She showed the courthouse logs. "He's been there late, no reason given. The night I was attacked, a light was broken, no cameras." Warren's face reddened. "Lies," he shouted, but Marlene pressed on, voice steady. "My dog Rusty saw it. He's no liar." Laughter mixed with murmurs, but she held up Clara's documents. Shredded papers hiding his plans to remove obstacles. "That's me, Pinewood. That's us." The crowd stirred, voices rising. A white woman yelled, "Let her speak." A black man shouted truth. Warren lunged for the microphone, but Daniel and Mr. Thompson stepped onto the stage, blocking him. Daniel spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I've reviewed her evidence. It's real. Judge, you've got questions to answer." Mr. Thompson added, "I'm filing a complaint with the state tomorrow." Warren's eyes darted, his control slipping. Marlene faced him inches away. "You hit me or you sent someone. I know it. Rusty knows it." Rusty's barks grew louder, urgent, as if testifying. The crowd was on its feet, some cheering, others arguing. Evelyn climbed the stage, linking arms with Marlene. Clara and Joe pushed through, standing tall. Warren stammered, "This is outrageous," but his voice cracked. A deputy, a black man named Leroy, approached, his face grim. "Judge, stepped down." "We're talking to the sheriff." Warren's hands shook. He backed away, the crowd parting like a sea. Marlene stood center stage, her breath steady, her cross necklace catching the light. The climax wasn't just Warren's fall, it was Marlene's rise. She spoke again, softer now. "This town's bigger than one man's hate. We're Pinewood, all of us." The crowd roared, black and white voices blending, a chorus of change. Rusty broke free, bounding to Marlene, his warmth grounding her. She knelt, hugging him, tears in her eyes. Warren was let off, his head low, his power shattered. Daniel whispered, "We're not done, but you did it." Marlene nodded, her heart full. As the festival resumed, music swelling, Marlene stood with her people, Evelyn, Clara, Joe, Daniel, Mr. Thompson. Rusty lay at her feet, his job done. The truth had broken free, and Pinewood would never be the same. Marlene's name, once a whisper, was now a shout echoing in the night. The night of Founders Day left Pinewood, Georgia, humming like a choir after a hallelujah. The stage where Marlene Davis had stood, her voice cracking open. Judge Warren Caldwell's reign was now just planks and bunting, but its echo lingered. At 58, Marlene walked home under a starlit sky, Rusty padding beside her, his brindle coat brushing her leg. Her navy dress was creased, her grandmother's cross necklace warm against her skin, but her heart soared. She'd faced Warren, exposed his bias, and hinted at his role in her assault with Rusty as her silent witness. The town had roared, and Warren had crumbled. Now the world felt wide open, but Marlene knew the fight wasn't over. Her yellow clapboard house on Sycamore Lane welcomed her with the scent of pecan trees and the creak of her porch swing. Rusty flopped by the door, his amber eyes soft as if saying, "We did good." Marlene brewed tea, her hands steady, and sat at her kitchen table. The satchel of evidence, notebook, logs, Clara's documents, still heavy with purpose. Evelyn called, her voice bright. "Girl, you shook the devil loose tonight. Folks are still talking." Marlene smiled, but her mind churned. What came next? Would Pinewood truly change, or would it snap back like a rubber band? Monday morning, the courthouse felt different. The air was lighter, the wood polished sharper, as if the building itself had exhaled. Marlene entered through the front door, her heels clicking, her stenograph waiting in courtroom B. Clara greeted her with a hug, whispering, "You're a hero." Joe, mopping the hall, grinned wide. "Judge ain't here today. Suspended, they say." Marlene nodded, her face calm, but her pulse quick. Warren's absence was a victory, but his shadow lingered. She sat at her desk typing a new case under a substitute judge, a gray-haired woman from Macon, who called her Ms. Davis with respect. It felt like breathing fresh air. The town was abuzz. At the diner, black and white folks swapped stories about Marlene's stand. She had papers, an old man said, sipping coffee. "That dog knew something," a woman added, laughing. Marlene heard the whispers at Mount Zion Baptist, where the choir sang, "Lift every voice with extra fire." Evelyn pulled her aside after service. "You've got allies now. Even white folks are calling for an investigation." Marlene's eyes widened. Daniel Hayes, the young lawyer, had filed a formal complaint with the state judicial board, citing her evidence. Mr. Thompson, the defense attorney, was rallying Black Pinewood to demand a review of Warren's rulings. But change wasn't smooth. Some in white Pinewood bristled, calling Marlene's speech a stunt. A letter in the local paper, unsigned, accused her of stirring trouble. At the market, a white woman turned away when Marlene passed. Yet others stepped up. Miss Lorraine, the librarian, shared more courthouse records, and a white shop owner, Mrs. Ellis, stopped Marlene to say, "I'm ashamed I stayed quiet. You're right about him." Marlene nodded, her heart torn between hope and caution. Pinewood was splitting open, and she was the wedge. Rusty became a town legend. Kids petted him on Main Street, calling him the truth dog. He'd sit by the courthouse oak, his water bowl now a permanent fixture, tended by Clara. One evening, Marlene noticed Rusty sniffing a spot near the hallway where she'd been attacked. His hackles rose, his growl low. She knelt, her fingers brushing the floor, and found a tiny metal pin, a tie clip with WC engraved. Warren's. Her breath caught. She tucked it into her satchel, another piece of the puzzle. "Good boy," she whispered, Rusty's tail thumping. Daniel met her at the library, his briefcase stuffed with legal forms. "The state's investigating Warren," he said, his voice steady. "Your notes, those logs, they're gold. But the assault's harder to prove. No cameras, no human witness." Marlene touched Rusty's head resting nearby. "I've got him," Daniel smiled. "We'll build the case. If Warren's tied to it, he's done." They spent hours strategizing, Marlene's stenographer's precision guiding their notes. She felt alive, her fear replaced by purpose. At home, Marlene hosted Evelyn, Clara, and Joe for dinner, fried catfish collards, cornbread. The table buzzed with plans. Joe shared a rumor Warren was holed up at his West Side mansion refusing interviews. Clara whispered, "Some clerks say he's shredding more papers." Marlene's eyes narrowed. "We need to move fast." Evelyn raised her glass to Marlene, who showed us how to stand. They laughed, but Marlene felt the weight. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was carrying Black Pinewood's hopes. One night, Marlene sat on her porch, Rusty at her feet, the pecan trees swaying. She thought of her husband Clarence, who'd always said, "Truth's a slow river, but it carves deep." She'd carved a path, but the river was still flowing. The state investigation could take months and Warren might slip free, yet Pinewood was shifting, black and white folks greeting her kids, waving, even the Deputy Leroy tipping his hat. Her name, once a whisper, was now a song. As she walked Rusty the next day, a young black girl ran up, eyes wide. "Miss Davis, you're like a superhero." Marlene laughed, kneeling. "No, baby. I'm just me. You be you and that's enough." The girl hugged Rusty and Marlene's heart swelled. This was why she fought not just for justice, but for a Pinewood where kids could dream free. The opening was here, a crack in the old ways, and Marlene would keep pushing with Rusty by her side until the whole town shone. Weeks after Founders Day, Pinewood. Georgia carried a new rhythm like a song finding its groove. The park stage was gone, but Marlene Davis's voice still echoed a melody of courage that had cracked the town's old foundations. At 58, Marlene walked Sycamore Lane with Rusty, or Brindlehound, his steps slower, but his amber eyes bright. Her navy dresses hung looser now, her grandmother's cross necklace a steady weight. She'd toppled Judge Warren Caldwell, his suspension a headline, her evidence notebook, logs, Clara's documents, and that WC tie clip fueling a state investigation. The assault in the courthouse hallway, seen only by Rusty, was her wound, but Pinewood's awakening was her healing. Marlene's yellow clapboard house remained her sanctuary, its quilted throws and coffee scent a balm. She sat at her kitchen table, reading letters from townsfolk, black and white, thanking her for speaking truth. A note from a young black girl read, "I want to be brave like you." Marlene's eyes misted. She tucked it beside Clarence's old Bible, her late husband's words, ringing truth carves deep. Rusty nudged her hand as if sensing her thoughts. "You started this, old man," she said, smiling. His barks that night had been her lifeline, his witness her spark. The courthouse was quieter without Warren. The substitute judge, Ms. Harmon, ran courtroom B with fairness, calling Marlene Ms. Davis and praising her transcripts. Clara and Joe worked with new pride, the side door now used by no one. Marlene's front door stand had set a precedent, yet shadows lingered. Warren's allies, a few white councilmen, grumbled about overreactions. A slashed tire on Marlene's car one night hinted at backlash. She reported it to Deputy Leroy, who nodded grimly. "We're watching Miss Davis." She drove on her jaw tight, Rusty in the backseat, her sentinel. Pinewood's divide was softening but not gone. At Mount Zion Baptist, the choir sang with fierce joy, and Evelyn organized a community meeting to discuss Warren's cases. Black Pinewood turned out, joined by white faces, Mrs. Ellis, the shop owner, and others who'd stayed silent too long. Daniel Hayes presented updates. The state had frozen Warren's rulings, reviewing sentences for bias. "Your notes, Marlene, they're rewriting justice," he said. She nodded, but her heart whispered caution. Warren was at his mansion, lawyered up, his silence loud. The assault case stalled, no cameras, no confession, but the tie clip sat in her satchel, a quiet promise. Marlene reflected on her journey. She'd been invisible once her stenographer's role, a shadow in Warren's court. His girl and sneers had chipped at her, but the assault had broken something loose, not her spirit, but her silence. Standing on that stage, facing him, she'd reclaimed her name, her place. She thought of her grandmother marching in Selma and her mother, who'd typed in segregated offices. Their strength flowed in her, a river unbroken. Rusty snoring by the hearth was part of that legacy, his loyalty a mirror of her own. The town saw her now. At the diner, folks offered her coffee, black and white hands shaking hers. Miss Lorraine at the library slipped her a book on civil rights heroes, winking. "You're in these pages, Marlene." Kids petted Rusty, calling him hero dog, and even the white mayor, nervous but earnest, met with her to discuss healing. Marlene spoke plainly. Healing starts with truth. Review every case. Make it right. He nodded, scribbling notes. She left Rusty at her side, feeling the weight of her words. One evening, Marlene hosted Evelyn, Clara, Joe, and Daniel for supper, smothered pork chops, sweet potatoes, peach cobbler. Laughter filled her home, but talk turned serious. Joe shared a rumor Warren might cut a deal, retire quietly. Clara frowned. He shouldn't walk free. Daniel leaned in. The assault's our weak spot, but if we find one witness, one slip, he's done. Marlene touched the tie clip in her pocket. Rusty saw it. That's enough for me. They nodded, a pact unspoken. They'd keep digging together. Walking Rusty at dawn, Marlene passed the courthouse, its clock tower ticking steady. She thought of the hallway, the pain, the fear. But she also saw the stage, the crowd, her voice rising. Pinewood wasn't perfect. Hate didn't vanish overnight, but it was hers, flaws and all. Black Pinewood stood taller. White Pinewood listened harder. Young girls waved at her, their dreams a little freer. She knelt by Rusty, his warmth grounding her. We changed something, didn't we? His tail thumped, his eyes her anchor. The echo of that night rippled beyond Pinewood. A Macon newspaper ran her story, calling her the stenographer who shook a town. Letters arrived from Atlanta, Savannah, even Chicago, folks who'd faced their own Warrens inspired by her stand. Marlene read each one, her heart full. She wasn't a hero, just a woman who'd had enough with a dog who'd seen too much. But that was enough to carve a path to make her name a light for others. As autumn leaves fell, Marlene sat on her porch, Rusty at her feet, the pecan trees whispering. The investigation loomed, Warren's fate uncertain, but she'd done her part. She'd stood, spoken, survived. Pinewood was listening, and that was a start. Her reflection was simple, courage wasn't loud, it was steady, like Rusty's heart, like her own. The river of truth was still flowing, and she'd walk its banks head high until justice ran clear. Marlene Davis's stand in Pinewood, Georgia wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. At 58, she turned a courthouse hallway's pain into a stage's triumph. Her voice toppling Judge Warren Caldwell's reign of bias. Rusty or Brindlehound saw the assault, no one else did. His bark's a spark that lit a fire. Now as autumn painted Sycamore Lane gold, Marlene walked with her head high, her grandmother's cross necklace gleaming, her name a beacon. The state investigation churned, Warren's fate hung in the balance, and Pinewood was listening, black and white, young and old, ready for a new verse. Marlene's story, like Rusty's loyal gaze, reminded us truth once spoken doesn't fade. Folks, this hits close to home, doesn't it? We've all known a Warren, someone who dims our lights, questions our place. Maybe you felt invisible, your voice a whisper in a loud world. Or maybe you've got a Rusty, a quiet strength that sees you through. Marlene's fight is ours, a call to stand tall, to carve our names into the world's heart. She wasn't a hero in a cape. She was a black woman with a notebook, a dog, and a fire no one could douse. That's power, your power waiting in your chest. So what's your truth? What's the story only you can tell? Take a page from Marlene, write it, speak it, live it. Don't let the Warrens of the world silence you. Share your fight with your neighbor, your church, your kids. Let's build a Pinewood where every name matters, where justice isn't a dream but a promise. And let's lift up voices like Marlene's, especially black women who've carried too much for too long. Their strength is our backbone, their courage, our map. Here's your call, friends. Like this story, share it, let it ripple. Drop a comment below, tell us your Rusty, your stand, your truth. Subscribe to the Black Women channel where stories like Marlene's shine, where we honor the sisters who changed the game. Click that button, join the choir, because every voice adds to the song. Let's make Pinewood's echo a roar from Georgia to every corner of this land. Stand with Marlene, with Rusty with us. Marlene's name is written in the stars now, a light for us all. So stand up, speak out, and let your truth carve deep.